Yes, you
Yeah.
can see the screen.
Okay, good,
Yep.
cool. So yeah, so there you go. Thank you for coming, for accepting my invitation, and I hope you guys didn't have any struggle getting into. Since you guys here, quite a big number of you were interested, surprisingly, which is good. Very happy to hear that. So this is pretty much automotive visualization for in Unreal Engine for mainly beginners who happens to start whenever the correct time or even chance to come across go into automotive. It's surprisingly, it's kind of growing field now, even though it's been there for a while. But knowing how automotive go better with time rendering real time, as well as to creating very fancy looking configurators, and even though people these days they use commercials for commercials Unreal Engine, so knowing how powerful it gets, that's why I'm here to show you some basics and trying to inspire you. Maybe something all of you can really get into it, whoever wants to. And that's good also for you, anyone who happens to start Unreal for the first time, to learn something about Unreal in general, from the for automotive, but also just in general, like in the industry level, right? So that's why I'm here to basically present you and help you as much as I can. Right. So towards the end, you guys can ask the question when I'm after I do all the training session. So just so that to give you a little bit more clarity who I am as a person, my name is Paul Martin Elias, and I've pretty much been working quite a bit on the field of 3D animation, and real-time visualization. Surprisingly, I happened to start doing cars as a passion, I suppose 2016, 17. And then after work hours, like been pretty much cracking with Unreal, learning how to create photorealistic stuff. And I think after somewhere in 2019, I got first projects in Unreal for clients. It just happened that it was just pure accident. And then, ever that since I've been just doing cars. And not just only been doing cars, surprisingly, people saw it very beneficial for helping visual production. So, and then eventually I became pretty much like a consultant for doing things like Netflix for Bentley, and trainings for Bentley and Dyson. And so it turned into this sort of endeavor of not just focusing plainly on delivering projects, but also helping how to figure out ways to not just create very fantastically looking photorealistic visualizations, but also how do you do this in real time so that it's playable for virtual production, but also configurators, or even to create these high-end looking visualizations for like commercials and other things that requires lots of attention to details. It just happened that I became also a mentor for CG Spectrum, KIF Academy, as well as I've been doing some bit of fellowships. And Bart is also one of the people here who happens to be authorized instructor like myself, and he's been doing a lot more than me and with fellowships. So, and then he's also been very helpful, and that's why he's here to, basically, doing be here and also support me in any ways in foreign shape. So you guys have two authorized instructor here now so far. So if you have guys any questions, we can then at the end maybe answer some questions. It happens that I'm also a chief technical officer and partner of Yumi Collective, which sort of like created 2 years ago. And also my friend is his co-founder, his name is Tamir. And also he's also here in our group. And also it would be cool to maybe later on chat and have a conversation if you guys interested. So another thing I want to also mention, I'm not sure if most of you know, I also wrote a book on procedural content generation on Unreal 5. So whoever wants to go and literally get to know more about the book, as also get the book, I just want to let you know there are some huge discounts now. So if you want to go for ebook, you get 40% off, and if you want a print one, you get 30% off. So whoever wants to, please do. And this is the link for any. I mean, this is the screenshot. You can take a screenshot, a screen grab, however you want to, and yeah, and then get the book. It's about creating procedurally using PCG framework, which got released 5.2, and it happened that I wrote the book about how you can procedurally generate environments, and that's why it's also could be useful for further visualization when you're gonna come up with doing virtual productions and so on. So. For anyone who's interested in procedural content generation, I will definitely recommend you guys do it because it's mainly for beginners who wants to get into PCG. So, for any of you who are quite new, Automotive visualizations mainly for photoreal rendering for vehicles, obviously, because this is what the whole main point is. It's mainly to not just visually make it look attractive for anyone who wants to buy a car. It's also a pure way of showing a part of art, right? Where people wants to see that different like ways of angles of how car may look like in a sexy way, but also have really nice the shapes that the car got to offer depending how light is, I suppose, projected and gives you that really nice outlook of the car's visualization. But obviously, we not just doing visualization, but also it's a very cool marketing thing for people who wants to see that really cool looking cars after all, and then decide to either buy it or just you have this pure fantasy of looking at the things. That's why a car visualization is a very fancy way to kind of get into it for those who wants to really enjoy and love cars, and not just cars but in general like the beauty of how you can put some vehicle and make it look really cool with the very beautiful reflections and so on. But that's why it happens that these days, even to this day, visualization, but people even go further down the line. They also create cool configurators, and it just happened that configurators started to get more fancy these days. And you can see Lotus, for example. I think Bentley did some as well. And then we also had some opportunity to do some configurators as well back in the day. And for those who really into this, that's something to watch out for because really cool stuff there. So that's why Unreal Engine became more of a very fancy tool to get yeah, let's just get very creative. And in the whole benefit of using Unreal Engine for this, it's all real time, right? Because technically, you using traditional like Maya, 3ds Max, and other tools out there can definitely be a very chunky way of working with this, because knowing how very slowly is something to render, because we're dealing with some renders that can go within hours per frame, like 8K, 16K resolution. Whereas with Unreal, you can do the same thing, but it's a matter of like 20, 30 minutes, maybe a frame, like depending on how what types of settings you go for, because you can have a path traced with a high resolution with lots of samples. That's why it takes less time. That's why most people tend to go direction real-time visualizations, knowing that it's faster, much more convenient, because we don't have to deal with something that takes hours where it can take way shorter than that. So that's why it's very good way to look into this, since it's very beneficial for not just companies, but it's also cheaper solutions here too. So what we're gonna learn? Basically, we're gonna step first is to how we can set up the project, and I'm gonna show you how we can create a project, and then obviously import the important assets. So this will be a very cool thing, because this is for anyone who heard Fab as well, because it used to be Bridge, but now Quixel Bridge, but even though it's still there, but it's not functional as much anymore. So now things start go migrate to Fab, which means it's also good to know how to use Fab, because most probably you haven't used Fab, or maybe you struggle to use, or maybe some of you have some experience. That's good. But here the plan is to show you step by step how to do this. And then what we're gonna do is to start getting to creating very cool substrate materials, which are gonna be simple. Since it's for beginners level, I just want you guys, I want to teach you guys how to actually use this, so that you can use your imagination further and trying to using those basics I'm gonna teach you. And you can pretty much wander around and figure this out on your own. So basically, I'm going to give you some basics for that. And of course, we're going to do later setting the lighting and reflections. So we're possibly going to discuss, well, we're going to discuss things, types of lighting for this, what's going to be cool about it. And I'll show you what could be very cool, like 3-point lights technique, where we can use sort of like a genre style, how we can present different types of lights, where we can basically use the types of lights to create very cool visuals just for the like still images. And that's what we're gonna go through it together on that one. And when we have time, because rendering settings, it can take a bit longer, but I can show you in the much simplest way of what types of rendering settings you need. And that's where we're gonna go forward with camera work mainly, which I think the best, most convenient here, because from the beginning, the discussion was to have cinematic shots creation sequencer. So we're gonna focus on how you can set up your sequences with the right camera rig setup tools that are available inside Unreal. So to begin with, let me just go and then load up the project. So I'm gonna first go and then open. So the Unreal, I'm not sure if you guys have received also an email from me where you guys need to have Unreal 5.5 for that, right? So I'm gonna open 5.5 and I'll show you how to do things by step. So to show you the steps you needed for this to start off with the right clean plate template. So let's just load it up. Okay, give a second. Let's just load it. Ah, there is it. Okay, so obviously there are templates. There's all the automotive, but traditionally I'm from the background where you do things from scratch because it's more fun. Because then how this is how you learn how to use Unreal. That's why what I'm gonna do in this step, I'm gonna go for games, and I'm gonna use blank. But make sure you also add some settings here. So because I'm gonna for maximum preset, which means it will use all the ray tracing, all the stuff that needs to be enabled, so you don't have to do it from the project settings inside Unreal. So that's why it saves you time. I'm gonna disable starter content, and what I'm gonna do is to call it here service webinar automotive. Okay, so I'm gonna just create it. And those, depending on what your computer setup is, might take some time just to compile shaders, but this is gonna be quite quick. I think we have someone there talking now. All right, so we go here, and we're gonna do first things first. I'm gonna close these. So first things that we're gonna have, this is pretty much your entire editor. We're gonna go and of course create a new level. I'm gonna go for basic. Actually, no, we just need to do first is to go and import the files we need. Oh, something slow here. Okay, good. So what I'm gonna do is go to my content drawer, and I'm on that thing. What you need to also remember is to install Fab, right? And most of you who are not familiar with how to enable Fab plugin, what you need to do is to go to your launcher, Epic Games launcher here, and what you need to do is to go and find a Fab plugin. Of course, the plugin here, you have to go and install it. So you need to basically find, if there's anything you can find it in your Fab library, then you could possibly find something called Fab UE plugin. So you're gonna have to go and install it on your engine. And that's how you get access to your Fab plugin. And obviously, if you cannot find it, possibly you might do is to go to your web browser. Just so quick, let me show you how to possibly do this. Fab, maybe because maybe it might not be there. So let's just go. And then if you go, and then obviously what's going to happen, you should be able to find a plugin, theoretically. If not, then that means it's inside it already in Epic Game Launcher. Just to make sure most of me know it's not. Okay, so maybe then you should find it here. And obviously, once you find it and install it, it will possibly tell you to go and enable the inside. So you might go check in your plugins, and you should check if there's a fab being installed. So then you have to go enable it. And obviously, it's going to ask you to restart it. So that's how you go and access to the fab marketplace. So another thing what I'm going to do is to go to Fab, and that the particular project I'm going to use for this as an example is we're going to use warehouse. I think I heard some noises there. So let me just, yeah, okay. So yeah, this is the warehouse we're going to use. So I'm not sure if you guys see this anything on there. So this is the warehouse quick sell. So because it's already in my library, so I can just basically go and add it to my project. Obviously, the problem is because it's 5.4. So you need to do is to keep an eye on that. That means you have to do is then go to your games launcher. And if you go look for your warehouse, what you can do is go add the project because it only works for 5.4, but there's a trick. You can also do is to show all the projects, just like I do it here. And what I'm gonna do is then go click on my project, which currently are on 5.5, and make sure you go select your version 5.4. And this is how you handle things with migration. So migration used to be that process before you do this, so you have to migrate all the files there. But because now you have this selection option where you can choose some of the projects which are kind of running on the higher a newer version of Unreal, and they can also kind of backward compatibility use kind of backward compatibility to work with older files, right? So that's also another good trick to work with. So, and obviously it's gonna add, and it's gonna add some files here. So hopefully it's not gonna take too long because it's already in my hard drive. So let's give it a go and check this out. Yeah, so we've got something running. Yeah, so let me just check here. So it's still gonna add. But anyway, just in case if it takes longer, I already have one project ready or open, so don't worry, guys, about that. But for the time being, it's good just to have that here. See if that is gonna push anything. I think it should be fine, soon enough. Just give it a go a little bit, just longer. Yeah, it's very fine, and it should be fine, completed. So, so I'm gonna do is go to that warehouse, industrial warehouse. And this is the project we're gonna use. Because to be honest, it's already pretty much set up for you. So sometimes be mindful on this kind of thing. So you have to look at if you have any options to get any freebies. And that's why it's so cool, because this is where you're gonna literally have that fancy, opportunity for yourself, just so that you don't have to waste too much time building your own stuff. Obviously, you have your own models, that's great, but because sometimes it's good to take benefit of that, is to get something that's free, especially with something comes from Quixel and that comes part of the fab. And that's why it's because it's all photo scan, it's realistic. Why not? Let's go for it, right? So it might take a bit of time, which I shouldn't be that long, because it's already set up. Just give it a bit. I'm gonna, um, it's almost done. It shouldn't take that long. Okay, let's just wait. So, I think we're almost done. Yeah. Okay. While we're waiting, what I'm gonna do also is to discuss the model of the car. So this is my car I picked on from sorry, give me a second. Yeah. So this is the car which I actually bought, right? So don't say it's fine. Oh, sorry guys, something's wrong. So I'm gonna let me just open this Maya here. Um, yeah, so it's still loading. Just so I'm gonna give you info on what types of cars is the most sort of convenient for working with visualizations. Um, Knowing how it can be a tricky part to squeeze out the most beautiful photorealistic effect of the car as you can. So my advice would be is to work with cars that usually have higher class topologies in terms of topology count. So don't you worry if some car may have 20 million polygons. This is something that can be literally handled through Unreal. That's absolutely fine. The only thing I would advise you to do, but also find a ways to try how you can optimize your car. So let me just go. All right. So at the moment, as you can see, this car is kind of like it's not as high quality as it's okay, but obviously you need to also watch out for topology because at the moment it's kind of okay. Now we're running at something like 15 million, because maybe there's some details of high poly, but what I expect to have when you work with something high-end visualizations, it's good to watch out for a number of quads, because usually the smoother the model, the better it is going to look on your final render. right? Because it comes down to reflections, but also the materials kind of reading better when you do it and dealing with Unreal. So keep in mind, whenever you work Blender, 3ds Max, or Maya, whatever you choose the software to work with, it's good to go and try and smooth the car as much as you can, but don't go too much, obviously, because there's no point doing something that's drastic. But as I said, cars can go really high poly because we work with cars that had 20, 25 million even polygons, quite easy. It was fine. Even we had configurators to deal with 20 million polygons. But obviously that comes with cost as it, well, you need to also watch out for environments because environments cannot be too complex. So you have to kind of juggle a bit like between those two, options here. So always keep in mind on that because that's something it's very crucial. And that's also another way to figure out like, what's the best thing for visualization because we know it's cars. So that's why, make sure everything else is optimized, but keep it cars the highest quality as you can. So you always have to keep an eye on just to smooth this stuff, like, as I just did now. Obviously, it's gonna take some time, but anyway, this is just a prime example for you guys to know. So yeah, it's gonna take some time a little bit. But it's good to give you a little bit more information. What is it to expect when you're trying to work with something like in terms of these models, especially when you're trying to have something exactly to at its highest quality of like having like models. And obviously this is something that most possibly clients of yours may come across it to see, oh, that looks quite triangulated or that looks a bit bendy on some parts of the model because it doesn't look as smooth as it should be. So always keep an eye on those situations because it's gonna be a part of that your process. So always make sure to deal with this because the Unreal works different, obviously. So at the moment, as you can see, it's taking time, which shouldn't take that long, to be honest with you. But let's just have a look because just in case, let's give it about a few minutes more. If it's gonna take longer, I'm gonna open because I already have another project that is ready prepared. So I had to also watch out for that in case this happens. Yeah, so this is okay at the moment. I think it's gonna. Yeah, it's gonna take some just a sec. So always keep an eye on these. So at the moment, what I'm gonna do is I already have prepared like a model for this, which I'm not gonna use the entire car for that. And also for the, as any one of you who wants to look for quality cars like that, you can also use Sketchfab, where you can find these cars. But what I would suggest is also maybe, of course, because I bought this car before. So if you wanna find some cars that quite matches this quality, you can also look for Sketchfab. You can get some decent looking cars. So this is something for you guys to keep in mind. So at the moment, let me check if this is still loading. I think it's doing something to it. Uh, yeah, that's right. Sheldon mentioned there's a Wire Wheels Club. That's another place to get some very cool cars there too. Um, and also to use the suggestions for attendees there too, because that's also a valuable thing, information. Um, I'm gonna basically, I think it's opening the editor, so I think it's beginning there. So yeah, I think we're down here now. Okay, so now we got a project. This is what it's going to look like. So literally what you see right here. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So as you can see, it's still doing something on the back, possibly. It's loading some, generating mesh fields and so on. But anyway, this is the scene you're going to work with. So this is today's lesson. And what's so cool, because everything's ready, right? So that's nice because that's fancy. So for now, what we can do is to basically, because at the moment it's all black and dull, so we need to make sure there's some light into it. But this is not something we're concerned about because now we're just gonna focus on how we create first material. But before we do anything, I also wanted to import a section of the car, which we have. So I'm gonna basically go for and also keep an eye on how you categorize your project. So make sure you name things by folders. So traditionally, it's good to be organized. So I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna create a new folder. People come with just naming conventions, but my method of naming conventions here is to start putting numbers next to it, so it's easier to navigate with a few things. So let's say I go O1 underscore models, and I'm gonna go and then go import. In this case, gonna be car. I'm gonna look for my car, which I should have it here. Okay, let me check. Give me a second, guys. Let's have a look. Uh, Yeah, that's the one. So this is the materials. Let me just have a look very quickly. Um, Give me a second. So I'm gonna use only one section of the car. And most of you who are not familiar with anything, maybe you guys use Unreal 5 before, but there's a bit different now pipeline of how you import the files into your Unreal. So what it does is literally uses a more, suppose, convenient way of importing. So now you can actually go and click on few settings that you don't need to have it. So you can actually disable a few buttons there too. But because at this sorry, in this given time, we don't really need anything because we're not dealing with scalar meshes. So I can turn that off. We don't need any animation. This model is just plain static model. With all this up, I can just go and import it, and then it shouldn't take too long to import. So that's good. Yeah. So now I'm going to categorize very quickly. Prepare shaders, that's fine. So it's still importing. Oh, we with time. Okay, good. So, all right. Let's let it load because there's some things there still needed, I think. Let's have a look. I think we're okay. Also because we have a lot of materials. And what's so cool is also for any of you who wants to get familiar more with the user interface, is you can actually do, let me just disable all of it. Reset filters. So you can actually go and create new filters. So let's say you want to only have static meshes, pretty much simple. So you can go and click on static meshes, and then you need to also add materials, and that gives you more organized way to dealing what is materials, what static meshes. And let me do the same for texture. So I'm gonna turn this off for now. So I go static meshes. So I'm gonna right click and then call it models, and I'm gonna literally throw those inside it. So I'm gonna just do this and then throw this into this, move it here. And so that gives you a little bit more clarity on how you can organize few things here. So I'm gonna do the same for materials. Let me just do that. So I'm gonna fill this once more and I'm select all of them. And I'm gonna throw this into materials. And I'm gonna do the same for textures. And that's the whole point of me doing these because you also maybe wanted to get a bit more, I suppose, organized in your own manner. So I always suggest you to do such thing because that's how once you get to this rhythm, then it's easier to deal with all things, right? Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. And so this is my model. This is pretty much section of the model I got originally because I don't need for now the entire car. It just needs to only work with two materials we gotta work today. So we're gonna work on car paint and we're gonna do glass material. So this is the reason why I've done on this. I want to make sure if this one has a glass on it. No, it doesn't have a glass. Okay, that's fine. So I made a mistake, but that's fine because I'm also have another project open. So I'll show you how it should look like the car. But for the time being, it's just ideal material to work with. So I'm gonna go and select these on Outliner. And now what I can do is to move them to the folder. So I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna call this car model. And that's it. So, and also you have already what we need for this specific exercise. Also, bear in mind for you, maybe guys who are very familiar with Nanite, I think this already has Nanite enables, that's fine. And it's sometimes what's so tricky because we gotta deal with Puff Tracer later, is sometimes Nanite can be a little bit odd. But that's fine because this is something I will show you later. Don't worry about it for now. So let's go and begin with the materials. Okay. So to begin with the materials, I'm gonna tell a little bit more how things are working with the materials. Okay. So to whoever is not very familiar with Substrate, so Substrate is sort of like a new way of how we deal with materials. What's used to be conventional, knowing how materials can be a bit complicated to work with. And now you have it more like simplistic form, but also gives the benefit of you proving that you can actually go further with getting more photorealistic effects, how light should be possible, like behave, you know. So basically making sure that it's very broken, sort of like broken, but it's built up on like few segments on the material editor. So we call it slabs. That's something I will show you guys in a bit. Interesting enough, this is already a proven a way of showing a layer mixing these lighting very complex materials that helps you to allow you actually to structure of whatever you're looking for to create very not too complicated, but something simplistic. It already has all the built-in module for you just to tweak with the right intensity. So basically, you create a very simple constant tweaks, as we're calling intensity nodes, and then where you just do plug and play, right? But obviously, that also requires some knowledge behind how material works. So that's why it's good to learn basics of materials. But if you guys want to go into Substrate, knowing already a material editor, that's something for you to basically you figure this easier. But obviously there are some caveat to it, but for this, so it's designed for anyone, even from the beginners, to get on and crack on, knowing how it's going to be easier for to give them that opportunity for them to learn something faster, but also be able to experiment more. But anyway, this is something I'll possibly show you. I mean, obviously show you guys right now. So I'm gonna basically go first is to enable Substrate, right? Because at the moment we are having materials, but as you can see, those materials are pretty much loaded up in that manner because this is like the normal material editor. So what we need to do is to go back and then go to our project settings. This is where you enable your substrate. So when you go to rendering tab, you need to go and just go type in substrate. Yeah, so what I would say, this is the first one you need to plug it. This is the tick. This is the most important one. And also some of them already enabled, which is fine. Well, also it's more optional, but I think that's also beneficial because when you click on these extra functions, it also enables you to how to say expose some of the material properties. Then you can then use them inside your material, right? So that's why it's sometimes good to enable all of them in case you might missing something and you want to experiment more. So that's why I would suggest to also click on this so you get all these free available. So I'm happy with that. I'm gonna go save it and restart. So and it hopefully shouldn't take too long from my memory. Let's have a look. That should be right. Um, any questions so far, maybe? Just a quick one before we get into a project.
All
Okay,
good so far.
okay, good. Okay. Because we haven't even started yet, so why not? So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's
I have one question.
yeah, go ahead.
Which graphic card are you using?
Specific on this project, because I go 5090, no, sorry, I go 5070 Ti. But you should be able to run any RTX graphic cards. Yeah, so it could be 2060, 2080 RTX, older models. Because if you want to use older models of the graphic cards like GTX, I don't know if Substrate can work. I don't know, I never tried, so it's hard for me to say it. But for this specific visualizations, definitely I would recommend something RTX, at least if it's minimal level though. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
I have 3070. I have 3070 Ti.
Oh, that's okay.
But
That should be all right. Yeah.
I'm planning for like 6,000. No, sorry, not 6,000,
Ace
5,000.
8
A
50. Okay,
blacksmith.
okay. Which models again? 50.
5,000, 5,000. A 5,000 blacksmith RTX Pro
You
card.
talk about the other graphic cards, line
The
of
new
graphic cards.
models, yes, the
Yeah, is
Pro
it that
one.
yeah,
Do
is
you
it
think
24
it's a
gigs on
worth
it?
for no, it's 48.
Oh, maybe I don't
Yeah,
know about that.
new model,
Okay.
new
That's a
model,
new
it's a
one.
48. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
6,000 is a 96 gigs.
Okay. Oh, that's good. That should be all right. That's gonna be easy for you to work with. I guess Sheldon got a question there. So, when it comes to your car model, should you handle EV? Yeah, I'd rather do this inside EC prior to integration to Unreal because Unreal I'm not saying Unreal can be not perfect for that. It's just wanted to avoid any problems later on when it comes to doing Unreal, because that also creates another instability and open for window for the errors. That's why I would avoid reviewing things in Unreal for now. Uh, from what I know, UV editing in Unreal. What I think was that it's doable, but just remember it's a chunky model. When the more difficult the model is to work with, then obviously you want to avoid this at all costs. So I would recommend you not to do it. Yeah. So definitely, I would suggest you to go and do this inside the DCC. Right. So that's why, yeah, that's why I want you to avoid this. Yeah. Let's treat Unreal like a game engine, right? For that. So it's that it's cool, but it's not that great yet to get to that level, right? So. Uh, um, Let's link. Let's just go check this out. All right. Okay, so now it takes time to prepare a shape, which shouldn't take too long. Um, um, Give me a second. Give me a second. All right, cool. Okay, so let's start with something we need to work with. So let me go and okay, it takes a bit of time to load it. Okay, so let me go and then create a new folder here. I'm gonna call it materials. So I'm gonna go all to underscore materials. And I'm gonna click and then I create a new material. And in this case, I call it car paint. Plain and simple. And I'm gonna open this up. So now what you see is pretty much what you see, you should see it, right? So I'm gonna delete this for now. And I'm also going to just give me a second, guys. So that's too much, too many windows here. So what's so cool is that Substrate has this now a new form of like how you deal with everything that you want to work inside the material editor. Because knowing how conventional that was, so to create a paint material, but you had to, as an example, I have actually here like something very cool to show you, is that to create a car paint material, this is plain example of how you do this with automotive materials. And it looks very super complex because that's pretty much a sequence of all these complex material functions, but that also comes down to a lot of textures. I need to load them and calculate them to make this very precise looking, not just material, but also how you work with the material surfaces. So that's why this is kind of thing that you used to go for when you had to create a very sophisticated level of looking, in this case, yeah, materials, car paint. So this time, because this you can create the same thing with Substrate, but a lot easier without all these, very complicated structure here that's presented like on this example. So for this one, what I'm gonna do is to show you what exactly you need to do to start off with. So the moment this is pretty much your material editor, this is your domain, because at the moment that we are okay with this. So because how you handle creating that very cool, not just reflections, but metalness, like calculating all the complexity of roughness, normal maps, as well as the anything that requires you to do all the chunky computations in your material, we call it slabs, right? So if you go look for substrate slab, this is what you actually gonna use this to calculate all the processes for your, in this case, material. Just to give you a bit more, so I'm just gonna give me a look. So this is what we're gonna deal with first, is to how we can work all these different layers of this material for the carpet. Because we know that for the carpet, we need to have an orange peel that gives you that really cool after spray. You get this really bumpy looking thing as it cools down, the spray, and then you get the surface on the carpet. But also we have clear coat, but we also have flakes. So that all the layers of different types of the car paint itself material, right? So what we want to do is to try and figure out how we could work this out to integrate all those necessary parts of the material to combine into this one given material, right? So that's good because this is pretty much what we're gonna work with. So first things first, what I'm gonna do is to create the main, in this case, base color. So it's very simple. It's so surprising. Someone's okay? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do is to first connect this to my front material because otherwise it's not gonna work. Obviously, it's not gonna do anything because it's quite simple. And what I'm gonna do is like a very plain and simple. It sounds as ridiculous as it might sound. It's just have to basically connect the nodes that you need. For this one, I'm gonna basically look for a color. So I'm gonna create a new constant, vector free, and I'm gonna turn this to a color. All right. So I'm gonna call it base color. And obviously I'm gonna change to something more friendly. So I'm gonna make it blue, and I'm gonna literally connect this to that. And there's like, of course, it's not over because this is what we actually need to work more for that. But just for an example, what you can actually do is to mix them two together. So in a sense, it's good to have that as one sort of like slab here, but obviously we also have to think about how we can integrate different layers of the material. Because knowing that this is just one slab, what you can do is to basically copy it if you want to just do that, or just look for another slab and just copy it. And obviously you can then connect these two. So you can actually go and integrate those two. Either one's going to be top one or the one that's going to be at the bottom, right? Because you can mix them two, like you create this kind of sandwich effect where you press them all together one by one. And I'm actually how I show you how to do it because this is where you actually use this other node where we call vertical layer. So that's why you connect these two nodes together and to create in this one proper layer of one material. And I'm gonna literally do is to use this as a bottom, and I'm gonna use this at the here as the top. So this kind of works similarly to what we call layer interpolation here. So it's like when you traditionally been creating materials back in the day, you know, like how you can do this with using lerp interpolate. So you have to kind of decide with A, B, and what level of alpha you want to change in between those two to read which layer of the material, for example, of texture or whatever the constant you're working with. So imagine this but with the material layers here. So similar concept, but it works more sophisticated. But at the same time, it works more like sort of like it's more powerful. Let's put it this way, right? So I can then now connect it. So I'm gonna use another color. So I'm gonna look for a color. Vector free. Cluster free vector. I'm gonna change this to be red, maybe. Just an example to show what's going to happen. And obviously you can, at the moment it's not doing anything because we need to also do some changes here. So, okay, so it's okay. So I'm gonna also, let me check something here. I want to make sure I go reading everything I need for this specific one example. Up, sorry guys, but yeah, so then you can actually have two, but because at the moment, because I'm not doing any much more than just reading these two colors, right? Because you can also swap them in between and make it this opposite all the way around. So this is kind of one principle of actually understanding that. But let me just go back to my original setup. Let me just, I don't show this again. Let me just reconnect this one more. And because now currently what we want to try and deal with is to make sure we are actually going to add some other additional layers. So I'm gonna start with first is maybe we're gonna start with flakes. Yeah, I think the flakes would be the best. So knowing how car works, you know that you have like these reflective flakes on your car inside your carpet, right? So this is what we're gonna achieve. It's so surprising. You don't really need textures for that because traditionally you had to use texture for that, but nowadays you can actually throw this into the mix, knowing that you can actually do with using just slab. And I'll kind of show you how to do this. So I'm gonna copy this and paste it right here in space. And let me create few nodes. So I'm gonna actually use one node, which is the constant node vector again, free, and I'm gonna call it flake layer, flake main color. And I'm gonna turn to like something blue, a white. And let me just duplicate it. I'm gonna call maybe I just call it main color. And I'm gonna call this flake main color. And I'm going to also try and see if we can just connect these two here. And I'm going to also use lerp for that. So I'm gonna lerp those two. So the reason why I'm gonna lerp is because I also want to try and have two different distinctive colors for the flags. But for this one, what I'm gonna do is just duplicate it. And I'm gonna call it second color, and I'm gonna keep it something as blue, maybe bluish. I'm gonna connect this to two. And I'm gonna then go and connect it. And also what's so cool, and every time you look at each of these slabs, I don't know if you guys can see, but you can look at every property that's given here, and then it gives you that extra information of what's happening here. Just to give you a context here, FO is literally means it's like a specular. So what it does is highlights the lighting. So everything that requires reflections to gives that definite shape of that reflection you're getting on your surface. That F0, that's what tends to decide to give you that this what we call like this specularity, in the sense that you can see the reflections of what it's given inside from that material generated. So I'm gonna do is to plug this in, and what I'm gonna do is to make sure I'm gonna do is another, because I already have a base color. So I'm gonna turn this off, and I'm gonna basically connect these two so I can use those two together. And what if we can go and substrate, and I'm gonna go and add this vertical layer, right? So I'm gonna connect these two. And I'm going to also connect these two together with that one. Also, another thing I need to do, because we haven't finished that yet. So this is part important, because that's when we want to start getting these flakes effect to generate on the surface. So to get this, it's interesting. As I say, we don't need textures. Why it's so cool? Because you can just use something that's already existed here. So that's why Clint is so cool, because this is what gives you that very cool effect of the flakes. So I'm going to literally... Let me just create a new constant. So if we right click, look for a constant, you can get a constant. And I'm gonna set this to once, because we want to make sure you then turn this on. Oh, it's taking a bit long. Okay, I think it's loaded. Okay. And I'm gonna do is also a number of UVs. So for this one, I'm gonna look for texture coordinate. And I'm also going to add another constant. So I'm gonna basically look for a new constant. Let me just go and right click and turn to something else. So I'm gonna call it flakes amount, flakes, number of flakes. Yeah. And I'm gonna just set it to 5 for now. And I'm gonna look for my multiply node. This is where we're gonna multiply those numbers, so we don't have to do manually from the texture coordinate here. And I'm gonna plug this into this. And just to finish on top of that, I am also going, let me just very quickly check where it's suitable for now to go and connect it, check what it comes out as. Let me check very quickly what else we need. I think maybe there's something I still miss. Maybe I know why, because we also need to, because this is the one that's important for us. So I'm gonna look for, because it's so interesting, because you can actually do is use one. So this is literally enabling your, so this what it does. It helps you to enable some of these stuff that we want to see on the surface. So in a sense, it gives you that from the information itself. This way you give that information of subsurface to be sort of like generating the results that you want to get on the surface, that you try to connect these two nodes, but you also make sure that you want to make it visible of what currently you're working with for this given structure of your material. So that's why you have these two substrates. One for this is to make sure that it's generating the flakes, but also other ones for generating the colors. So to make it more fancy, because at the moment it's kind of rough, so I'm gonna have to decrease the roughness to make it look more shinier. So you start seeing some things, but obviously we still need a color. So I am going to also, another is to add this specularity here. So I'm gonna create another layer here of 0. And let me check what else does it, because we need also color. So I'm gonna maybe change this color to something different. So I'm gonna look for different colorations. So maybe set a blue. Okay, so you start seeing some very cool effect you're getting on your flakes that you're getting. That's very cool, because that's what exactly we need for this specific exercise. And let me just check else anything what requires it. So I want to make sure that or whatever we're working with already, it is enough to have something to pick up on and accelerate for extra quality stuff. So in this case, I think we're good with this. However, for SS mass map, which is this one here function. There's also another trick because at the moment, what it does, you can also use something called substrate transmittance. So let me just write it down. And the reason why I started to experiment more is because I've noticed a very interesting thing because surprisingly this node, which kind of call it material function for this specific substrate, is also does pretty much similar trick to what it does here with constant. But for some reason I've been testing, so this is something I've been pretty much experimenting on my own end. But if you connect this to this, it might look pretty much similar results, but it might give you, yeah. So this is way better because the reason why I use one is to try to enable it. So what this does is basically improves the quality because that's why you enable the entire structure of this, what this material should be doing by giving this Fresnel effect, but also give you this another looking, quality of that object, which is this case coated with the blue color tint of coloration, right? For this case. And let me just go set this to 1. So it's more, should be more reflective. Yeah, oh, it's too much. I'm gonna so 0.2. Yeah, so now we start getting that what we're looking for, that shape of what car paint is supposed to look like, right? So in a sense, we get in there, but we're still not there yet because we also want to get this orange peel, also get the clear coat to get the extra layer of that very cool musky quality of the practical looking car paint look. So for this, what we're gonna do is to just give it a bit more space. So I'm gonna just make sure I have enough for this to work with. So let's try work with car paint, in this case, peel. But for this one, I'm gonna use actually a texture. So actually I have some room to add some texture. So let me create a new folder. So we call it free textures. And I'm gonna import those textures into this for, yeah, into this. Let me just go for like this. Give me a second, guys. Let me just check. Car webinar. It's in here. Let me from my memory. No, okay, let me just check. Right. Yeah, this one. So I need to have the orange peel. Yeah, so I'm good with this. So I'm just gonna use that texture for now. So I'm gonna literally do is drag and drop into this space here. And I'm going to start working on the practical part. So which we're gonna do is to actually, what we can do actually copy this one of them. So I'm pretty much can get confident on this. So I can literally do is to copy this too. And then just stick it here, just keep it like that. So now, as you can see, we're getting some shape, but obviously we're still not there yet. So we need to start adding few things to make it look like a practical car paint. So now what I'm gonna do is then I'm gonna use this normal map to make sure that I am dealing with flatness of the normal. So I'm gonna is to integrate the flatten normal, which in this case is going to change the intensity of our normal here. And obviously I'm gonna create a new constant. So I'm gonna right click and call this orange peel intensity amount. I call it, say, yeah, intensity maybe. Yep, that will be it. So for now, let's set to, let's say 1.2. And I'm gonna throw this into our normal. Okay. So now if we go closer enough, we should be starting getting some shape out there, maybe. But let's just know maybe because there's more to it than meets the eye. So we need to also multiply. Currently, it's running at the very low texture coordinates. I'm gonna push this number to higher. So I'm gonna create a new texture coordinate. I'm gonna look for my multiply node and I'm gonna create a new constant. And I'm just gonna right click and convert to our orange, peel, scale. And I'm going to set to format 2. So I'm gonna apply these two. All right, so we're cool. And I think we need to do this also because I haven't, sorry, my bad, because I haven't even connected yet. So that's why, my bad, sorry for that. I think we are okay for this one. However, we need to, oh yeah, let me actually copy in this one. And we can also turn this SSMP, FMP here. So we can just plug this in. And what's the next step here, which pretty much ideal here, so is to make sure I am going to another substrate vertical layer. So I'm gonna click this in. We're gonna add this as a bottom and this one as a top. Okay, so now I'm gonna plug those in, and obviously we get some problem. Okay, all right, it works. That's good. You see what's happening here? It's very cool, but this also could be effect of what's we running with our budget. What we can do, there's an option here, unless we need to do, which I think we need to basically, let me try to see if full simplification works. If not, okay. So what you need to do, there's an issue with comes to dealing with this kind of problem. Because there are some limitations has been sort of turned on for this current situation when it comes to using substrate materials. A sample is to there's a limitation and number of how many bytes we can generate by pixel. So in this case, I'm not sure if you can do this. So basically what you need to do is to turn it back on. So that's the only issue I'm getting with Substrate. So there is a solution for that, and which I should have basically prepared for this. So let me just, because I know that I have written somewhere. You bear with me. Let me just check what is the issue here again. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so this is give me a second, guys. So I'm gonna because I know there's um give me a second, guys. There's one thing I need to go and enable. Let's just remember the command line. I need to find out. So there's a thing about this. What you need to also watch out for is that you need to make sure you enable this thing inside your. I think it has to be done in engines. I remember my memory. Yeah. So what you need to do is to go to. Yeah. So we need to go to our project, but we need to make sure we go out and let's go to show our Explorer. So I'm gonna switch that off for now because I think we're gonna have to restart it again, the project, but that's fine because at least we have something to ready to work with. And I'm going to config my memory. Um, give me a second, guys. Just want to make sure I got all the tabs enabled. Yeah, cool. So we're here. So so what we need to do is to add some line command here. To make sure that our engine has more sort of like we can pack more substrate bytes per pixel, right? So because at the moment it's set to 80, as you saw it here on this our material here. So which means this is like the one, if you look it up here once more with me, from what you see, you just run out because the reason why is because we're currently reading at 80. So what we need to do is to make sure we increase it to at least 128. So then once you set this up, then obviously that problem gets fixed. So to do this, we need to go back. And what we need to do is under rendering settings, let me just check very quickly. Rendering settings. Yeah, that's the one. What you need to do is to go and type in substrate dot bytes per pixel and set it to 128. Okay. So let's just save this for now. And I'm gonna close this first, this entire project. I'm gonna save this. And then once it's saved, and make sure you close this. And let's run this once more. Let's get this sorted. So I'm gonna. And a good thing is it's recorded. So in case you might stumble across this issue, it's going to be obviously in the footage. Let's go back to it. What we have. Can we hear, right? Come on. Come on. Oh, this is on. Okay. So now. Okay, cool. So now I'm gonna go to my maps. I'm gonna open this once more. Let's have a look. How we are with timing. We're good. It's 9 o'clock. So yeah, I'm going back to my materials and I'm gonna look for my material that I've currently created. So now you should see that 2020 has been. So now, as you can see, the problem now is gone. So it kind of fixes the issue that you don't get the unstable but also distorted looking material because that material already has a bit more pixels to as it sort of bytes to start yeah, per each pixel, which means it's more room for information to process it through. So that's another benefit here. So let me just go, maybe what I can do is increase the bit of scale here. I'm gonna move, okay. Save it. And so now we have literally given this looking material. And this is cool because this is what we currently have to work with as it, like knowing this is the car paint we're looking for. But also what's so cool having cars is that you can also have another additional layer of that clear coat. And that's why I'm going to also show you how you can add this to it. But usually clear coats are mainly used for like fiber materials, like carbon fiber materials. But sometimes maybe because you want to be a bit more creative on that, depending how you want it to render your visualization, is to add another additional layer for that given, let's say material so that you get extra quality what comes out later when you render something out, right? So maybe that's why it's good to maybe perhaps add this. So this in a sense what I'm gonna do is I'll show you how you can just set this up. Um, let me just add this up here. So here, what I'm gonna do is literally what we've done before. What's so cool, because at the moment, you don't really need anything else than create a new slab because there's already slab called clear coat, surprisingly, right? So if you go right in clear coat, there's this very simple one which already does this job for you. So what you just have to do is to go and create a new constant. So I'm gonna create new constants here. I'm gonna convert to like so this called diffuse, albedo color. And I'm gonna do the same thing for this one. I guess we can call it FO, but I usually tend to call it specular because pretty much similar to that thing. Obviously, it's more complex than specular property. I'm gonna also create two extra nodes here, so I'm gonna call and convert this to clear coat intensity, and I'm gonna do the same thing, but for this one, it's gonna be roughness. So I'm gonna copy this name, convert it, but turn it to roughness. Roughness, yep, the roughness. So cool. So let me set this to 1 so that it gets enabled. So I'm gonna literally, yeah, that's the one. And I'm gonna plug this in here. I'm gonna call it diffuse. Yep. And what I'm gonna do is also, because this is also another thing I want to also do is to make sure that this clear coat doesn't work all the time. So I'm gonna also add another thing which I call this opacity. So I want to also change the opacity, whether you want to have that clear coat or not, right? So I'm gonna, for this, we need to do is look for substrate coverage weight. So that's another node to add as your opacity node here. So I'm gonna also create a new constant, and let's name this clear coat opacity, I guess you can call it. I said to something as low as 0.01 maybe. I gotta go to weight, and I'm gonna add this to this. And to add this all up, all I'm going to do is to add all these substrates all together. So I'm gonna look for add substrate. I'm gonna add this to that B, and I'm gonna add this to this, and you should start getting some things out of this. Let's prepare shaders. Okay, so you start getting this kind of clear coat effect there. Maybe not as visible, but you might also, if you need to tweak a few things there too, so you get a bit clear clarity here. So what's this is going to show on the surface. Yeah, so maybe there's not much, but yeah, you start seeing something there, right? Even though it's not as much visible, but anyway, this is something you can work with this when tweak it in your material instance. So let me just check everything else that I got here with me. So I'm gonna rename this to like base color specular, I guess. FO. And this won't be our roughness, but that's base color roughness. All right. Remove this. I hope I did it the right way. So I'm just maybe because I've been doing a lot of things here. This is like, okay, this is a flake. So I'm gonna move this out of the way. I'm gonna call C for comment. I call it flakes. And I'm gonna make sure there's a different color so it doesn't look too the same. This is our base color. Okay, this is our base color. Yeah, base color. Cool. And this will be our orange peel. Peel, yeah, cool. So all right, so just change something like that. That's fine. And that's gonna be our clear coat. Layer coat. Cool. So now with this all organized, I can now move it up. Okay, okay, save that. Let's go create a new material instance. So I'm gonna go and right click and create a new material instance. So it's mi_car_paint, and I can just drag and drop into this. And there you go. This is like where you could create a new material. Yeah, so now you start seeing the effects you're getting, right? Even though it looks still a lot low, Windows to fix this stuff. Let me just go back. Wait, something happened here. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So now you start getting this very cool effect. Obviously now, as you can see, that flakes is a bit too much, too large for this. So what I can also do is go back to Carpaint, and I'm actually going to expose this here. So which should be already here. So that's fine. Also, I'm gonna right click and create a flakes density. Yeah, that should be fine. I'm gonna save this. And then now, because literally I have more control of it over this, instead of me going inside on and out to my material editor, I can just go and then literally go open this up. And I go open this up and I can change anything I want to work with this. So now, as you can see, I can change my flakes number here. Now, as you can see, you're getting that kind of cool effect there. Obviously, you can do much more with this, but this is something you can work with on your own end, and then obviously expose more values here to have this very cool effect more visible here. Uh, so that's like an ideal thing, that you can have a little bit more opportunity to experiment more on your end. Let me just change the color so maybe it's a little bit more lighter. Maybe like that. All right, cool. And then, yeah, anyway, this is something you can work on your own end when you have time. Yeah, so it's cool. So we got some car paint here working now, so which is cool. And another thing I will definitely do is that also very cool. And you might be seeing these glitches sometimes. It's just mainly what happens. You need to restart your Unreal Engine. It's just the GPU error you're getting, and that's something you can avoid for now because it's not causing any major issues. Only problem is when you see this, is when you're trying to render something out, right? Because when you start seeing this during your time to, let's say, trying to render something out, then obviously you need to fix it. But the only way you can do this is obviously turn this off and turn on back on again. Um, um, okay, so cool. So I'm gonna now go into in this case, what I'm gonna do, let me just go check very quickly again. Let's go back to our presentation here. So what I'm gonna do is that we are going to create a glass. So this is a very crucial. It's just the problem with this model because it looks like it did import the model of the glass from glass here of the car. So I'm gonna basically do is to improvise here a little bit. So I'm gonna use just a very simple shape. So what I'm gonna do is to show you how you can glass here, and it's surprisingly very simple, nothing too complicated on that one. So I'm gonna literally do is to bring this on, and I am going to, yeah, I'm gonna literally open a new material. So I'm gonna do is to create a new one. So I'm gonna right click and look for a material, and I'm gonna call this glass. That should be fine. And then what we'll do here this time is I'm gonna go a little bit fancier because glass it's pretty much connecting one slab because this slab will already do the job for you. But I want to be a bit more creative because I want to combine two slabs together, right? So first things what we need to do is to make sure we set up our materials to work with translucency. So in this case, the one we're specifically looking for is color transmittance. And also, let me just, it's a bit slow here for some reason. Also, make sure you change your lighting mode to surface translucent volumes, surface translucency volume. Another thing I want to also do is to enable refraction. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable that section here too with that comes with this. So I'm going to look for, it was in here, I can remember. Refraction, refractive index. Yeah, we're going to keep it as an index of refraction. All right, so cool. So now we're good to go. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to create the first slab, a substrate slab. And I'm going to add these few more nodes here. So I'm going to do is to create a vector of 3. I'm going to basically duplicate that. So why is it a bit slow here for some reason? Okay, I'm going to go right click. And then I'm going to call it base column. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit maybe lighter, because it's going to be white glass. And then also, if you wanted to, also we're going to do is use some reflection. So I'm going to literally maybe use constant for now. I'm going to keep it at 1. Maybe I'm going to turn also specular reflection. All right, cool. And then I'm going to also with the roughness to make it more looking glass. And then I'm going to add this to this. And also I'm going to do like I did once before, is I'm going to also introduce the substrate transmittance into path. And I'm going to apply this into this. And because this is already transmitting something, but I also want to make sure it's have some color to it. So I'm going to literally copy this, stick it here, but I'm going to rename something else. So I'm going to keep it like as we call it right here. So I'm going to call it the same name. So it's going to be transmittance color, just to make sure. Oops, sorry, my bad. Something's wrong with my keyboard these days. Color, cool. And I'm going to plug this in. So now, obviously, it's nothing happened because we need to plug the rest of the things. So I'm going to literally do is first, I am going to also create an opacity here. So I'm going to right click, look for substrate. It's called coverage weight. Coverage weight. I'm going to plug this to this, and I'm going to create a new constant. I call it opacity. All right, plug that in. Cool. So now we got BSDF reading there, so it's cool. All right, at the moment, obviously, it's because it's very high, so I'm going to set this to 0.2. So we get something going on here. Just want to make sure also there's other things I need to include to it. Also, yeah, I need to make sure I have my refractive index enabled, so I call IOR. And I'm going to call it like maybe it's set to 1.2 for now. Cool. So now I should have it something ready and running now. Cool. A bit slow for some reason. Okay, I think we're good for now because we have already something running. But I also want to do, because I also want to try to have second layer of my, I want to check how is it with timing. Okay, because we need to also catch up another topic here. So what I'm gonna do is then obviously create another substrate, a vertical layer. And then I'm gonna add these two together so that we have a coverage of these two working all together right there. So I'm gonna copy this way, and that should be fine because we need to also make sure that this is not reading a different coloration. And obviously I'm getting some errors with the memory, but that's okay. That's kind of thing that you always watch out for. I'm gonna also, maybe I can turn this off, and let's be creative because I can do is use this base color, but instead of this base color, I can use like a second base column. Okay, so we don't repeat the same, because remember, if you repeat the same names, it's still gonna read as the one value. So especially property, make sure you change your name for that. And I'm gonna call it secondary color, a reflection maybe color. And I'm gonna plug this in here. I'm gonna call this roughness, second roughness. Okay. I'm gonna save that. All right, cool. I'm gonna right click. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna open this up, right click, and I'm gonna put material instance, MI. And let's just use something here. So I'm gonna drag and drop my sphere into this space. So we're gonna use this as our sample to check what it's going to do. Yeah, that's so on. So I'm gonna literally throw this into this. So now I start seeing glass material that's emitting through it. So you see these reflections you're getting from. Usually that's down to your, as I mentioned this before, on some reflections you might be getting from this, right? So you can see how it changes. Slightly opaque it becomes, but also changes your reflections. You can make it like very sort of like blurred and sharp once you get also very shiny reflections too. And you can do the same thing for this too as well. You can actually add these two properties all together. So as you can see, like it blends in, then one gets switched off, the other is reading. So you can kind of mix those two together. And that's a very fancy way of like experimenting on your own terms. So you can see how cloudy it becomes. And obviously you can change the coloration here too. And so on. So you can see how very nicely reflected it becomes too, as well, just so that it gets a bit more clear view to this entire, of course, shape of this entire glass rendering here too. So you can basically work this out on your own if you wanted to. So that's something to try and be mindful about it. So that gives you a little bit of information how you work with substrate materials. And I think just to show you what overview of this is entirely is like. For this one, I just showed you how you can create your own, the technique of how you can create your own substrate materials using this technique of I just showed you, but also you have an ability to create different types of materials. So for example, you have a car paint, or you can create a glass separately and create lots of different material instances for this given matter, right? So this is like another way of how you can work with substrate. So that is something for you to play with, which is cool. And because I also want to make sure how much we have with timing, knowing so well, I go, but it's still like about 40 minutes, 45 minutes roughly. So what I'm gonna do is to now get into more fancy stuff. So with this one, I think I'm pretty much fine. So I'm gonna open up, let me just sorry, just give a second. Let me just check something here. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is to open another project which is ready prepared for this one. And from this project, I'm gonna show you, yeah, it's a bit slow, so let me just turn off this one. Maybe that's the reason why it's doing this. Yeah, that's fine. Save that. Maybe there are too many projects running at the same time. Okay, that's a bit slower, right? Okay, cool. So now what you see, this is the same thing, but this time because I decided to have my own space here, so like this for the lighting. So this one, primarily what I'm gonna focus on here is that how I'll show you what's the difference between like the different types of lighting, right? So because you can, specifically depending on what exactly you're using this current situation, let's say you do a path tracer. Ideally, HDR backdrop is the more fancy thing to use for a backdrop. Sorry, for path tracer, it just happens to calculate better lighting. From my experience, I've been working with when it comes to visualizations. Whereas Lumens is also good, but I wouldn't say HDR backdrop is ideal for Lumens. There's a ways to tweak things around to make it work, but ideally, I would suggest to use normal other types of lighting, which I want to show you also because we want to make sure we fit in with the time. It's a shame because I should have done it 3 hours next time, but now because it's 2 hours, I thought we can do it quicker. But that's fine. We can still catch up with a few things. So for now, let me go back to our scene. So let me just go and then set this thing whole up. So now what I'm gonna do is to show you what you can actually do here. So at the moment, there's no any other lighting here. So this is only like plain simple. And I had to also remove something. So like I removed the other sections. I also included the wall, so it makes it more realistic here. So what I tend to do is that when it comes to Puff Tracer, I'm gonna show you how to do with Puff Tracer first, is I tend to use this plugin called HDR Backdrop. Let me just check it. All right, so I go. And what you need to do when you're on the plugins, you need to go enable. And I will ask you to, of course, to restart. So next thing what you also do is to make sure you are adding into your scene. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to basically drag and drop this space here. And of course, that also shows you what other HDR you can use for this. So I don't know if you guys familiar, but HDR Backdrop is just one of these plugins that Unreal has released since I think for 23, 22 Unreal, where you can actually is to calculate lighting based on your HDR texture that comes with it from the cube map. And because I already have a few examples, I can change this. As you can see, lighting changes too. And you can also make it more intensive, less intensive. And what's so cool, because let me just bring the car here too. I'm not sure if the car, and I already have car prepared for this, so I can just drag and drop into the space here. So the car is already prepared, so I can just move around like this. And I can then, I want to make sure that I just bring it up. And also, if you can look it up, your project, when you create a new project, you should have this option called Path Tracer, right? As you can see, this is what's happening when you're trying to calculate lights. If you don't have this option enabled, sometimes you need to watch out for it because sometimes the project settings, what's so valuable is to make sure these options are enabled because since when you were creating your project, you already had it enabled when your settings, when you were setting up presets to your maximum. But just to be sure you have everything ready, you can also try and see if you have it enabled here. But because the path tracer heavily depends on your RTX, so I would also check if your DirectX 12 has been also enabled. So make sure the 12 is also enabled here. So of course you can find it here under Windows and make sure this is enabled. Yeah, so make sure you all this up. So also make sure shader model 6 is also one of the latest one. So that should be also enough for you to understand. So yeah, let me just check very quickly. So this is the HDR backdrop. So before I could jump into Lumens, I just want to explain a bit more about how we can work with the path tracer in this situation. And the reason why it's so cool, because when you work with Substrate, it's also very convenient to work with, in this case, path tracer, because that's what gives you a lot more cleaner, but also very cool looking materials outcomes too for this given matter, right? So as you can see, my path tracing started to load and it creates all these samples. So at the moment you start getting some visuals here as well. So this is another way to kind of go work with this. Another thing I also want to show you what it's like working with Lumens. So this is for now okay. I'm gonna go back to my lid, but before we can work with Lumens, what's so important is to also go to your project settings and explain a bit more what exactly you need to make sure to magnify and also enhance the quality of your overall Lumens quality after when you start doing not just rendering, but also real-time adjustments and so on. So I'm gonna go to my rendering tab, and what you see here, roughly, you need to make sure everything here is set to lumens, right? Because the moment my capture resolution is set to 128 samples, I want to go, resolution, I want to go to 1024. Obviously, this is very crucial because depending on your GPU and your VRAM, they can take up too much of your VRAM too, because the reflections are a lot more complex. That's why you also keep an eye on this when you're dealing with something like this. So when you go higher, obviously this is consume more your GPU power too. Also, another thing is to make sure your hardware ray tracing is enabled. So this is the must thing. But if you don't have it, that's fine. You can also work without this, but you need to work with the software ray tracing. That kind of makes sense. Like here, this is called software ray tracing mode. Also, because at the moment I set this because currently it was a surface cache, before it was surface cache, but also making sure to hit lighting for reflections to get better, not just GI, but also get a lot more computed reflections to get a bit more realistic looking reflections, not just on the surface, but also on translucent materials too. So that's something to keep in mind on. Also, for any of you, because it's kind of still a bit experimental, always watch out for things like megalights because it's a kind of new thing. Megalights, it helps you to work with lots of lights real time without you literally bottlenecking your performance, even though performance is still gonna be there an issue sometime. But when you're using like hundreds of lights, obviously that saves you time, so you don't have to worry about competing all of them at once, right? So that's why Mega Light's very handy for this. And also make sure you support a hardware ray tracing for that, given the situation here. And I think we're okay for this one. So now we can go back to our, in this case, given lumens. Because now we have to discuss how we can work with lighting. So for this one, I'm gonna literally do is to this time remove my HDR backdrop. And what I can do is to start adding other types of lights. And as you can see, there's other light here, but obviously this is emissive. And because Lumens likes emissive lighting, as you can see, it's very cool because now you can turn on and off and it generates lights. But downside of it sometimes is when you start rendering, obviously this can also cause sometimes some problems with giving you artifacts on the surface. But this is something we also is best to be mindful about, is because this is when you are trying to work this out for your post-process settings, where you have to change few settings on your lumens reflections, but also global illumination to fix some of these issues. But for now, let's leave it like this. Maybe I can turn this off. Let's just go with the traditional lights. And I don't know if many of you knows how to do this. So I'm gonna go and add lights here. So I'm gonna go to my, let me have a look. Right, so I'm gonna go environment light mixer. I'm gonna start adding. So this is a very cool tab. This way it helps you, easy way to add all these lights you need for this. Give you an example. I don't need volumetric cloud. I just need the height fog. I think we're okay. So now we have all these lights here that it's needed. I'm gonna basically add those in. Let me just go check if I have everything right here. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. I'm gonna move this to a new folder. I'm gonna create a new one. Lighting outer. Yeah. So, and obviously now because it's a bit foggy, but that's okay because it's something we do here. So this is where you can decrease your intensity. So you don't need to have that as much as you wanted to. And obviously you can do all these adjustments here too, right? So this is where you have more play, room to play for you to do these changes. What I also do, I like to do volumetric fog. This is really cool because it shows you how lighting really works like in this given situation. So that's why what I'll do is to do this. And also what's so cool, because now, some reason very slow. Let me just go check something very quickly. Oh, it's very slow. I don't know why. Okay, maybe because there's another project here running somewhere. I guess, sorry guys, let me just, very slow. Or maybe I'm running out of GPU for now. Oh, no, it's faster. Okay. Yeah, I think there are too many projects running the same on the background. So let me just save this. And what I want to show you is that you can also work your ways around with imperfecting your lighting. So what's so crucial, especially when you try and deal with lumens, is that that's where it's trickier to also add an additional time for you to be more prepared to spend more time on the scene when you're trying to make your visualization perfect, because you need to add a bit more extra lights. So in this case, what I also do is that this is where I wanted to present you also an idea of using this kind of lighting scene with 3-point light system. Of course, you can do this in Puff Tracer, but the whole point of doing this for this specific example is to give more extra lights on the scene using this method. So if you wanted to, you can also work this out around it. So if you can add more extra lights here. So this already has a setup here, already done this before with this. So I got few lights here. And also make sure you kind of experiment more on this. So that's why it's good to give a bit more free room the opportunity to deal with some of the different types of lighting. So because for this given example, I'm using Spotlight. So Spotlight, it's like a, as the name itself says, oh, it's just you get this spotlight in normal like theaters where you see the spotlight. This designed to have a different cone angles as well as other angles where you can adjust that. So knowing this, obviously you can pretty much replicate this scenario here. And what I like to do is sometimes work with EVs. It's very high because of course the higher EV there with the lower numbers, that's why it's very sensitive. So keep an eye on this. But what it does, it gives you that really cool lighting at the back. That's why it gives you this extra layers of shadows here, projection. And obviously you can change this by changing your like the softness of the shadows. You can see right here on the bottom left, you see that roughness of the shadow changes as I change my source of this angle here, right? Radius. And that's something cool because it's like something you can try adjust it. But obviously, that comes at cost because you can see some of the lights there, specular here. So keep that in mind. That's something for you to play with. Another thing I would suggest here to do, because at the moment it sometimes it's good to basically go for like additional lights because I have also directional light coming out of the window. And what I can do is also adjust this directional light. So pretty much I go and select my directional light here. So if I go, because I'm not sure where is, okay, so I'm gonna bring this heap here. I'm gonna literally, all right, cool. I'm gonna bring it up here, just so that at least it's closer to my scene. But also there's a very cool thing what you can do is that you can change it this way. And now as you can see that really the temperature of this whole scene changes very nice dramatically. And it's really cool. Now you start getting this very cool looking vis of this given scene because what's so cool about this scene is all like photorealistic models, all being scanned right from the real object. That's what gives you this fancy looking lighting altogether. Giving this is what example of this, given this warehouse here, it's good to use because this is like something for you to practice on, right, as well. So I'm gonna just go lift it up a bit. So now you can see, and also when you have light direction light, you can basically hit Control and select L. And with the control selected, you can actually move this around just like that. There you go. You see how really nice and shiny it becomes, this part, especially when the light sheds through it. You can see how natural it becomes. That's why Lumens is good. But as I said, it takes time to really work on the lighting properly. Because if I decide to run at a puff tracer, it still looks good, and you don't need to do a lot more complex stuff with lighting because lighting is already kind of calculated for you, right? So that's why it's so easier because puff tracer has this sort of like ability to project real lighting, if that kind of makes sense, and generate using the light bounces and calculates more mathematically comparing to traditional. And Lumens does a great job too. It's just that there's more to Puff Tracer compared to Lumens because Puff Tracer helps you to give that more realistic view to it too as well. So that's why it's sort of techniques you can work with this when you're trying to work with lighting. Because lighting, it's a very not just an easy, explanation. It requires a lot more basically topic to discuss. So that's why when it comes to another webinar like this, I might spend entire like webinar on just lighting because currently what I'm trying to do is to set up this car so it looks ready for visualization. So let's see what we can do next. So next bit, I want knowing how much time we got here because I want to also spend with you guys on the Q&A. So let me give an extra few, I suppose 20 minutes, 10 minutes. I suppose it's, yeah, let's say 10 minutes. So I'm going to show you very quickly how to set up sequencer. So let me go back and go to my, yep, the sequencer. So this already, my sequencers are basically enabled as they created. So what I'm gonna do is create a new one. So right click into your space and I'm gonna go little sequence, ls underscore, we call it shot 101. And for this one, I'm gonna open this up. Come on. It's already opened. And I'm gonna create a new camera here, just select it like that. As you can see, I move this around. Okay, I wanna make sure the car, okay, so it's good. So as you can see now, my camera is like enabled. So now it's set to spawnable. So the only time it's enabled is every time you close this, your camera will just disappear. But every time I open my sequencer, just like I have it here, it will pop out once more. So I'm gonna save that. And I have to click on this viewport here so that I can use this one to work with the camera directly. And of course, I want to make some adjustments to it. So what I'm going to do, because at the moment depth of field takes a bit space to get a bit like fuzzy and so on, you can go fix this. I like to, this is the one. Yeah, so what I need to also think about is like ideally what I tend to do when it comes to my car visualizations, I use the format of feedback DSLR, right? And what I like to do is also change the sensors width depending on my camera shots. But because I like to do very panoramic, I like to sensor change to 40 and I change this to 16 to height. And also what I do is I don't like using too much universal zoom because you can do it here, obviously. So you can just do that. Yeah, you can zoom in and out like this. Change this to right, so straight on. And also what we need to fix this is our manual focus distance because at the moment it's too blurry. So what I can do is then use this color picker and just do that. Or what's so cool, there's this debug mode here. You can actually show you where exactly your plane of where depth field appears. And you can adjust it your distance depending on how close you want depth of field or how far you want it from your main point of interest. So I'm gonna disable for now because I don't need that. And you can change the adjustments, make those adjustments here. But what I like to do, because I like it more cinematic, I like to keep it sharp here right in front, but make it very blurry at the back. So I change my current aperture to as low as, let's say, 1. Of course, too blurry, it's not natural. I'm gonna fix this, so I'm gonna do this. And also, let me change a bit of lighting. So I'm gonna kind of work like this, something like that. So cool. I like it too. I don't know about you guys, but it's cool for me at least. And what I can do is then use path tracer, and as you can see, it looks very nice and fancy. So if I make it the very full window, uh, obviously the noise comes in because it calculates each pixel where the light's supposed to be generated in. So that's the kind of thing, it's normal. And this is what kind of it should kind of makes a difference when it's trying to use work with lumens and of course with path tracer. And that's cool because now you can see how clear and effective the method of this visualization looks like when you apply these substrate materials to it. But at the same time, how do you deal with this so that you can get this super have fancy looking realistic shots to that too? So next thing what I want to do is to also show you how you can actually use cameras to pan around it and make it look really cool too as well. So I'm gonna go back to my viewport here. So I'm gonna unlit this and I'll go back to my camera. Let me just turn this off. So I'm gonna literally, I don't know why it's always changes to. Okay, so yeah, so I'm gonna do a very cool thing. I'm gonna use camera rig rail, yep, and I'm gonna literally do that. And what you can actually do with camera rig rails, you can actually create them and make them very cool cinematic shots around it. Like imagine like you are in a little trolley here with your camera. I don't know if any of you worked in the sets before. It's like, you have the little trolley or like some like a rig crane where you move with the camera. And you could do the same thing with this one. So I'm going to drag and drop into this. And what I like to do is also set it to spawnable. So I don't want it to be all the time in the scene. So I'm going to convert to spawnable actor. And what I want to do is attach this now to my camera rig rail. Let me just, I think it's this the way it should be. Yeah, good. And so now I can then use this idea to change this angle here. And I'm going to do I'm going to, let me just go maybe a little bit further up. I don't know how many of you can see something on the screen. So I'm going to make this like this. So you guys can see everything on what's on my screen. Okay, so what I want to do is focus on this specific camera. So what I can also do is to make sure that my camera at the moment, because if I go and use my camera rig rail and I set the, why is it taking too much? Okay. Let me just current position. So if I set to 0 right here, and then at the end, I'm going to set to 1. So I'm going to keep at 1. Oh, okay. So as you can see now, every time I move, my camera rig wheel moves around it. I don't know if you can see, so many of you can see it at the moment, but this is what's happening now. Okay, cool. I don't know why it's so slow, but anyway, this is what happens when you move. So at the moment, It's sort of attached to one, just the camera, but the problem with the camera, it doesn't not being kind of locked with its axis rotation. So that's why the camera it kind of moves freely. So to fix this problem, you need to go back to your rig rail, add the lock orientation trail. Let's just make sure you enable it. So now, as you can see, as I move around, your camera moves like that. So that's very cool. And obviously, you can also, if you wanted to keyframe your not just the current focus, but also you can, let me just make it a little bit bigger. You can also change your, yeah, your manual focus distance. So every time you move around, as you can see, yeah, your shots are getting looking greater. And of course, you can smooth your movements around to make it a bit slower if you wanted to. So if I make this bigger, all right, cool. And that should be all right. Okay, make this bigger, just like that. So now if I've run it through, so you see you get these shots. Of course, that still requires some time to modify your rig rail, because at the end of the day, it's all about making sure the angles are right. So every time it moves, it doesn't look too rigid, it's just very smooth. So those are kind of things you kind of have to keep an eye on, of course. So when you work with this kind of stuff, you can also animate your camera at the same time. So if I go and then try, see, let's see if I can remove this guy here. So make that. All right. Like something like that. Maybe this will work. Like something like that. So imagine you are this visualization where you present the car from different angles and so on. And you can do the same thing in so many ways too. So let's say I wanted to create another, shot. So I'm going to duplicate that one. So I'm going to maybe change angle here. So now I've decided to maybe swap the positions. So I'm going to go, let's say, upwards. Let me just do that very quickly. Let me, sorry, it's a bit, maybe do that. And then let's say my camera, because at the moment my transform has not been, okay. So I can then change my camera angle and change it to this angle here. So every time it moves. So this is just an example. So that's just for you to kind of play around with that. So like, let's say I have a camera here. So as I move pan around from what I can see, so let me just go back to my camera view. As you can see, I play around like this. Of course, I need to fix my focus. Okay, good. I'm just trying to fix this guy. Yeah, so let's say, imagine that you're doing this kind of scenario, right? So what happens, what if I want to have these two shots working together, right? And there's actually a very cool trick with that. So what I tend to do, I gotta close this. I'm gonna create a new camera. Where is the, sorry, level cinematic? I call LS master. And I'm gonna go and add these two. So I'm gonna literally add the substruct, we call it subsequent structs. And for this one, I'm gonna use shot one, and I'm also gonna create a new one. So I'm gonna add another one. Let me just do it here. Subtract, yeah, and then I'm gonna add another shot. And so cool, because now I can adjust these two, so I can have these two running at parallel to each other, so they switch in between. And I'm gonna also add, what is it called, the camera cut track, so we know we're dealing with. So now, as you can see, if I run it through, your camera should switch automatically to another shot, right? Yeah, so that's the one way of doing the very cool stuff there with that given example for the master. So now this is like your example of how you can work with cinematics. And obviously this is like just an idea how you can work with these. This is what usually we do with visualizations. Of course, you don't have to use camera rig rails. You can actually just use camera and just animate them by hand. But in case like when you try and deal with these kind of visualizations, it's good for you to just play with this. And also what would be super cool to see what it's gonna look on Path Tracer. But obviously it's very noisy. You're not gonna get like a very cool looking effect in a second. Obviously it has to render first. So you can imagine the final visualization of what car can look like when trying to have this very cool, super cool motion. All right. Let me just do that. All right, cool. So now, so imagine, why isn't it playing? Okay. So imagine when you have this kind of very cool visuals running on your, given this example, you can imagine that you're creating these very cool cinematic sequences that adds up into this one specific master sequence where it switches to another angle, right? And that gives you like a very cool, effective, creative way of planning you how you can work with your storyboard scenarios for your given visualization. So, okay, we have 15 minutes. So let's see how many of you enjoyed the session. Let's go to our Q&A. Let me just go, where are you guys? So let me just, first, okay, so let me go and obviously now, just so that's the, thank you so much. Sorry for like the time has been kind of running low. So yeah, I can see some of you had questions. Can the focus distance be attached to a null actor? Yes, you can. That shouldn't be any problem. So yeah, so let's say you have an actor, right? So like, so let me just show you very quickly. Let me just go. All right, so let's say, why is there no camera here? Weird. Okay, anyway, I'm just gonna use this as an example. Yeah, so from my understanding, what you try and do. Okay, let me just go back. So you are planning to, give me a second, let me, was it there? Oh, yeah, there's a big glitch here for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, let me just try a new camera here. Okay, so now you wanted to have this attach your actor to an actor. Yes, of course you can. So let's say you are, I don't know, I suppose you have some actor like, let me check. Maybe I have some examples here I can use from it. Uh, like for example, as an example, I can use a cube, right? And let's say I want to add this cube to this, as given this, sequencer, and you can actually do this absolutely fine. So what you can basically do, and you can treat that as a cube, a static mesh actor. You can add it to this, and then what you can do is then attach this to your camera. All right. So every time, obviously, it should be all the way around. So I attach this to my cube, and obviously now something happened because my camera's orientation changed this. Okay, let me get out of this. Where's my camera? So I need to fix this, so I'm gonna have to reset this. Okay, there you go. So if I go back to my camera, so now you see my camera is attached to this. Yeah, I mean, where's my, yeah, so now as you can see, the cube is connected, sorry, the camera is connected to your cube. So now you can actually do this freely by even changing your transform. So if I decide to change the transformation of this cube, and then click it on this, then obviously it's all attached, right? So now you can also use this idea to attach this cameras to, let's say, that cube actor that is given on this given example. So yes, the answer, yes, clearly you can do that. Any more questions? Oh, Sheldon.
Yeah, can you hear me all
Uh,
right, Paul?
yes, I can hear you. Hey,
Hey, so first and foremost, thank you for doing this webinar. Obviously, I
yeah.
follow you off and on LinkedIn, so this is the
Uh,
first time I actually got a chance to like see you work in
no,
action. So
likewise.
thank you for this.
Likewise. That's all right.
Um,
Mm,
my question for you is, as someone focusing more on lighting and look dev, um,
hmm
using a project like this, how best can
hmm
you, I guess, manipulate some of the lumen parameters or things to do if you're seeing to kind of really pull a lot of that
Pull up.
detail out? Because I feel like I'm hitting my ceiling with trying to pull
Mhm.
out as much realism as I can out of my scenes, but
And
it's kind of
you're not the only
tough.
one. You're not the only one, I'm telling you, because it's just been across everyone's in the community. So Lumens, it's a tricky part. Problem is, I wish because only we have 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah, just so that give you more understanding the Lumens problems that we all getting. So it's down to post-process volumes usually, because honestly speaking, there are a few I suppose, call with CVAR, like that they can variables sort of type it in and make them activate. But remember, Lumens, it's always been sort of like already activated as the default inside the Unreal Engine. The only thing we need to do is to use post-process volume to tweak all these numbers in. Unfortunately, this is all experimental. So as you can see here, this is already kind of prepared. So in terms of you getting out of coolest effects of the lumens, is down to post-process volume. So as you can see, you need to play with those settings very carefully. Make sure you activate some of the settings which I already did in project settings before. Plain and simple, it's just to make sure all of this time that you mostly time spent on is to make sure to get this post-process volume sorted. Then once you fix this, you also have to work out your materials, because problem with the materials, which I noticed though, is I noticed like if you have low roughness and in terms of intensity, so it gets more shinier, the more lumens it becomes more tricky to fix. So I've noticed between value of 0.6 to 1, usually it's like a very safe space gap to kind of tweak your shininess of some surface to eliminate any problem with noises to use that lumens can encounter with, right? So that's one thing I picked up on from my observation. Another thing is to also work out your values of samples that you work with. So you keep an eye on what settings you work with here to lumens, because honestly speaking, people are kind of look for ways to fix with CVAR, but the problem with CVAR, they only work to a certain degree, all right? So it's all down to how you are setting up your lighting first, and also how you set up these post-process volume settings right here on this one. I know it sounds a bit dull in a sense because it's like, hey, I've been doing this all the time. Why is it I have to repeatedly go through all this nonsense? Well, there are certain things to this because unfortunately, it's like you have to keep rendering something, keep on checking on the quality of what's like out of this output settings that you've done it for the rendering part, right? As well. So you have to always compare these two. But also another thing, I think the best way to look into this way is to make sure your materials are well suited to making sure that your lumens sort of like the best way to put it, like reflects on those materials. So as I said, use like a lot of like materials that have lots of roughness textures, because I don't know if you guys know, but if you have a roughness texture, this already GPU knows how to calculate these reflections. Because if you just do it like from just keep it simple, very simple notes of like metallic property and roughness, which is plain Lambert material, then that's where sometimes it can be trickier for the lumens to do generation. I mean, to generate some results too. Even though you can fix it, but it's just gonna be painful sometimes process depending on how many objects you got on the scene. What I would also look at out is the emissive materials. Emissive materials, you can tweak some of the numbers, but also emissive materials can generate lots of noise too, unfortunately. There are a few things there they can try and fix this. There's this flickering thing. I remember there was this called command line called flicker or something. Let's see if I'm not sure if it's still there. At least it was on the 5.2. 5. I'm not sure if they still do that to this day. No, okay. So there was this very cool lumen, if I remember, the flickering issues, but they're gone. And then because this flickering was mainly for the reasons of like having the hair strands, because the hair strands apparent lumens doesn't like hair strands. I don't know what's like no, now it's different, of course, but when you are using emissive materials and then trying to reflect the hair strands, there used to cause lots of issues, and people used to drive nuts with that kind of thing. So that's the thing. So just to make a less complicated answer for you, Sheldon, you have to spend some time on trying to work those post-process volume settings, lumens, global illumination, specifically also reflections, and also be mindful of how you can work with your materials, and also use lots of textures, roughness textures for this matter, and also try and tweak not to be too shiny in some parts. With car visualization, it's kind of a bit different because obviously you still have to work with different buffers, right? Layers. So clear coat, car paint in general, like orange peels and so on. But that's something you can also try and work it by tweaking a few things. That's why for me, when I work with the visualizations, I tend to use Path Tracer for that matter, because that's where I get the best results. But Lumens, you can still do it. It's unfortunately because the time is running out because honestly I can give another lecture for the technical details of lumens. But it takes a long time to fix this. So yeah, it's just you need to be very honestly patient with that and obviously there are some solutions there too with some certain lumens, but it's also remember dependent on where you are and it comes to environments. Because when it's open space, I found that the lumens it's a lot easier to fix than some closed space when you have lots of lights going on around it. I think that's how I would portray this. I hope Sheldon there was a kind of clear understanding of this. I mean, I know I wish we had more time to explain that. Yeah, it could be nice to maybe chat about this next time, as well. If you want me to, I can find some extra solutions. And maybe if you need some, you can always contact me, obviously, on my email. I can help you out with some of the things as well if you try and face something. If that's something for you, okay with that? Yeah. So, thank you. So, yeah. Any pro. Okay, so ref. In the post-process volume, if we change value path tracer, it will make our renders more better than. Yeah, we'll still eat your GPU. So the it's interesting because if we had an hour, I would show you how you guys do the rendering part. Because honestly, like just to give you a little overview, let's see how much we got 10, 5 minutes. So just to give you a little bit overview here. So this is already by default set to high settings here, path tracer, right? I'm not sure you guys can see it. The only thing is, obviously, when you start rendering something based on what post process you already given those values, it will still take some time for it to, unfortunately, but render. And that's given because path tracer is heavy on terms of computing all these lights per pixel. Because remember, ray tracing and path tracer, the difference between is ray tracing only hits one or a few, depending on your settings, like rays of lights per pixel. Whereas path tracer, it does thousand light rays, 10,000, depending how many you want to say per pixel. So that's a lot of heavy computation. That's why you get a very cool lighting effects out of this, scenes as well. So just be mindful about this, and that's why it's another thing, another time for this topic. Because if you guys interested, please email me. You guys, I think we have my email. Please email me if you guys interested in this kind of topics. I'll be more than happy to do another webinar like this, but mainly on rendering stuff at some point. And just let me know. Give me like feedback on the things as well. What you guys want to learn from it to next time, because I think 2 hours wasn't enough, in my opinion. Could have done another an hour for this because I really appreciate teaching you guys, and I hope you find it guys valuable after all. And if you guys want it, of course I'll make a what I'll do, I'm gonna record. It's already recorded, so still recording. But once it's done, then obviously I'm gonna share it as a YouTube video, and then and I can post it on LinkedIn, or I send you guys over an email. And I really appreciate for you guys taking time. So I really appreciate for that. So we still got 3 minutes. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Like I try my best. So yeah, and that next time will be definitely worth getting into more car stuff. But I think it would be fun doing more animation with the cars if you guys are up for it. Yeah, but just guys email me with some ideas. Would be super cool to know.